James, as I said, it is an honor to have you here with us today. As Brian said, you're the first congressman to ever come in the office of KACo, and it's an honor, and it is much more an honor for me because of our friendship over the years, and we have been friends, and I appreciate you coming down, and a few questions I would like to talk to you about that's probably dear to my heart and dear to yours also. Right. And so first off, I'd like to ask you just these few questions. How's your role as Agriculture Commissioner and then member of the Kentucky General Assembly has helped you in your role in Washington?
Well, it's really helped a lot. First of all, I was a 6-term Kentucky state representative, so you kind of learn about the legislative process. Right. The legislative process is very different than being an executive because you have to build alliances and coalitions to get a majority of vote. When I was a state representative in Frankfort, there were only 100 representatives. Now I'm a member of Congress and there are 435 representatives. So it's very difficult to get a majority of 435 to agree on anything, but my experience in Frankfort helped me with that. As far as being agriculture commissioner, it's really worked out well for me because I think of the 435 members of Congress, there are only 6 that ever farmed in their life. So agriculture is one of America's most important industries. It's our district's biggest industry, very underrepresented in Washington. So being a former ag commissioner and a above average sized farmer, it helped me get on the ag committee and move up real quick to where I'm on the conference committee now for the Farm Bill. And I think that you look in Congress, you got 435 really good qualified people. You've got to try to find a niche in an area where you're kind of considered credible and knowledgeable. And for me, it's been agriculture, and it's really helped me kind of play a pretty big role on the ag committee for being a freshman.
You know, James, you're from what I call West Kentucky, the first congressional district, and it is to be a farming community. Kentucky is a leading state east of the Mississippi River with cattle. Right. And in saying that, I'd like to ask you not only about livestock, but also the other parts of the Farm Bill. How's things looking for the Farm Bill in Washington?
It's looking okay. You know, it's like everything else. It's very difficult to pass a major piece of legislation. The Farm Bill is a piece of legislation that affects farm policy for 5 years. So every farm bill is for 5 years. The current farm bill expires September 30th of 2018. So it's time to have a farm bill. The holdup in the farm bill right now with the conference committee, because the House passed a version, the Senate passed a very different version, is not over ag policy. It's over food policy. So the majority of the spending in the Farm Bill goes for things like SNAP, which is what we used to call food stamps. Right. And what we did in the House is a lot more conservative than the Senate. We put work requirements on food stamps, kind of like what's happened in Kentucky, the attempt to put work requirements on Medicaid recipients. We're trying to take advantage of the strong economy. The biggest complaint I hear from employers in the 1st District is they can't find workers. So we felt like the Farm Bill's every 5 years, the economy was strong, let's take advantage of the economy and try to have a welfare reform aspect to where we can start getting people off welfare and into the workforce. And do that by putting work requirements on able-bodied people with food stamps. The Senate's having a very difficult time getting to 50 with that provision, so the holdup right now in talks on the Farm Bill revolves around work requirements for food stamps, kind of the welfare reform component. But the ag policy, I think there's a general consensus among the Senate and the House and among Republicans and Democrats for the most part.
Well, let me ask, I guess the second part of this question is, what would it mean for Kentucky counties and also counties across America? Because it not only you're not only working for Kentucky, you're working for all of the country.
Absolutely, and I don't think there's a more important piece of legislation in Washington for rural America than the Farm Bill, because agriculture is the dominant industry in the overwhelming majority of rural counties all across America. So the farm policy impacts your federal crop insurance. It impacts also the environmental legislation and environmental programs. You're starting to see a lot of tourism coming into rural counties through hunting and through environmental type, agritourism type activities. A lot of the cost share to get the land ready for things like your hunting and your kayaking and things like that is funded through the Farm Bill. So I think it's very important for rural America. Also, urban America, your food policies in here, not just the food stamps, but also the school nutrition programs for all your public schools. And that's funded through the Farm Bill. The language on how the food nutrition programs for all the food service directors in every school system in America is in the Farm Bill. So it affects every American in some form or fashion.
I want to just add just a little bit to that question. I've been noticing, and you're noticing it everywhere, these larger farmers, they're cleaning fence rows to fence row. I guess what bothers me is what has happened out in Kansas and those type of areas will eventually the conservation people step in and say, hey, look, you're going to have to back away and start leaving more filter strips, things like that. Because I have noticed that, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that. It doesn't farm, and I'm afraid it's going to make a difference someday.
As long as there's this Congress, it's a conservative, pro-business Congress. This president, we've tried to reduce the regulatory burden. You had that proposal from the Obama administration, the waters of the U.S., that would have done some things like that, made bigger filter strips, not allowed farmers to plow through anything that would be remotely considered a ditch or a passage for water. They were defined as a navigable stream. So I think that we've eliminated the regulations that would create an environment for something like that. But if there are farmers that want to do it, in the Farm Bill, there are conservation reserve programs. There's a program called EQIP that would allow, the EQIP stands for Environmental Quality Incentive Program, that would allow farmers to do that if they wanted to kind of supplement their farm income with hunting income. On my farm, the hunting revenue has really increased over the last few years. So I think there's a real opportunity for farmers to add value to what they have, but also for rural communities to capitalize on this tourism, because the sporting industry is a huge industry that can only happen in rural America.
Right, you're right. And one question that I know this has been real dear to you, and you have worked very hard when you was Commissioner of Agriculture in the state, is a hemp and commercializing hemp. And I know we had some grown in Caldwell County, I guess maybe about 3 years ago. And because of, I don't know if there was any kind of weed chemical that you could spray over hemp, and it didn't work. But how is that looking? Is there going to be I guess I want to ask, I know there's several states are legalizing hemp to be grown, and will that, the production of it have an effect on the price of hemp, or what do you think about how that's going to be coming here to Kentucky? Well,
I'm real excited about where we've come over the last 5 years in Kentucky with industrial hemp. That was the first year I was in office as Ag Commissioner. We said we're going to make hemp a reality in Kentucky. We did. Senate Bill 50, which was carried by Paul Hornback, state senator in Shelby County. It set up a regulatory framework where we could begin with pilot projects to grow hemp. Fast forward to today, 5 years later, Kentucky's the leading industrial hemp producing state in the nation. About 26 states copied our Senate Bill 50 and passed in their states, including all of our surrounding states. So we've been a success story in Kentucky with industrial hemp. You have a lot of processors now that have located in Kentucky that are processing hemp. If you go in any independent pharmacy in the state, you'll see a variety of hemp products through the CBD oil, cannabidiol oil, that are selling like crazy. People are using it for arthritis, anxiety, a lot of different things. You're also starting to see companies set up shop and make investment, like Sunstrand outside of Louisville, that's using the fiber to produce automotive parts. You have other companies in the state that are using the fiber. Murray State University is doing tremendous research on the production of hemp, so you know what how to prevent the weeds, how to prevent any disease outbreak and stuff in hemp, because there were no records on that because it wasn't legal to grow in Kentucky. Murray State's also doing research with hemp to use it as a livestock feed. And I think if that works out and the preliminary results look like it works out, you're going to see a lot of hemp grown in Kentucky for livestock production because it's cheaper. It would be cheaper to grow hemp silage than corn silage. If you're into the environment and sustainability, it's more sustainable to grow hemp for livestock feed than corn. It's also more sustainable to make furniture from hemp fiber as opposed to trees. So I think that the hemp industry is very bright in Kentucky, but like any new industry, you have a lot of startups coming in the state. There are companies that are going to be well capitalized, that have a good business plan and a good market that will make it, and they'll create manufacturing jobs and new opportunities for farmers. And then you have some companies that are what I call dreamers, that don't have any money, that may have a good business plan, but they don't have any market, that probably aren't going to make it. So right now we're experiencing growth pains in the hemp industry. There are communities that have embraced hemp companies that are going to see a tremendous return on their investment. And there are communities that are probably going to be heartbroken. So all in all, I feel like the future for hemp is very bright, and Kentucky will be the epicenter of that because of our efforts back when I was Commissioner of Agriculture and the Kentucky General Assembly, the majority of which supported that legislation.
Yes. Moving on, what is your proudest accomplishment since you've been in Washington? I know you've been there just 2 years.
Right. I guess getting appointed to the Farm Bill Conference Committee, because in 2017, my first year in Congress, the biggest piece of legislation that we voted on and passed Congress was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which significantly reduced federal taxes. In 2018, I feel like the biggest, most major piece of legislation that will pass Congress will be the Farm Bill, because again, it is a 5-year piece of legislation. So we could theoretically have 2 more presidents before the next Farm Bill. So it's a very big piece of legislation. Being appointed on the conference committee as a freshman was a big deal. So I guess that's been my most proud moment. It's very difficult. I tell people the biggest problem with Congress is there are too many congressmen. So 435 members of Congress, it's hard to stand out. But luckily we've got the issues of agriculture and rural economic development that I think play well for me. I have credibility on those issues. There aren't a lot of people wanting to be the agriculture guy or the rural economic development guy, because most members of Congress are from suburban and urban areas. So I feel like being on the Farm Bill gives me a platform to be able to influence the direction of rural America and ag policy. So I'm real happy about that.
Thank you. What do you think are the biggest issues facing counties today, and how can counties work with Washington to get things done?
Well, I've said this before I went to Congress, and now that I've been there close to 2 years, I can say it with confidence. Rural America is so underrepresented in Congress. Again, most of your members of Congress are from urban areas. You look at the Kentucky delegation, you have the 2nd District Congressman from Bowling Green, 3rd District's from Louisville, 4th District is from a more rural area like me, the 5th District Somerset, 6th District Lexington. So even in Kentucky, the overwhelming majority of the federal delegation, and the senators, one from Louisville and one from Bowling Green, are from the bigger cities. Rural America has a unique set of challenges. Rural America didn't benefit from the trade agreements like the suburban areas and urban areas, because the new economy after NAFTA passed revolved around communities that had universities, that had superior infrastructure, whether that be rail, whether that be interstate, whether that be airports, waterways. And a lot of the map of the United States, rural America, kind of got left out. So as we look at these new trade agreements that President Trump's trying to negotiate, I believe there's so much potential there. If he's successful in renegotiating a good deal with Mexico and Canada and negotiating a bilateral trade agreement with China, I think we can see a renaissance in manufacturing. And now, one of the biggest issues in manufacturing as we move forward won't necessarily be infrastructure, it's where are the workers? We've got to have workers for manufacturing in America, and I believe that if you look at the unemployment rates across the United States, rural America have some of the highest unemployment rates. And these communities desperately need manufacturing back. Because if you go to the Fredonias, you go to the Gamalias in Monroe County where I was raised, and you see old factory buildings. Every little community had a factory building because at that point in time in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they needed workers. And as the economy changed, export markets grew, the competition grew, they focused more on infrastructure. I think in the future it'll be on where is the availability of workers. And I think rural America can fill that void. So I'm optimistic about the future of rural America, the rural counties. I know the magistrates and commissioners, the small town mayors and city councilmen, they have a difficult job, more difficult than anyone in Congress, more difficult than anyone in the state legislature, because they just don't have the revenue flow, because the jobs just haven't been created in most of these rural communities in Kentucky. So I'm hopeful for a renaissance in manufacturing, and I'm hopeful that we have leaders in place in Frankfort that recognize that rural Kentucky is hurting, and we have an economic development team and cabinet that will really focus on trying to work with the members of KACo, the magistrates, the mayors, the county judges, to locate industries in these small rural communities.
James, at the end, I just want to tell you this has been a real treat for me and for KACo, for you stopping by, and I know I've learned a lot by talking with you, and I hope maybe we can do this in the future. Other questions that's very important to county government.
Well, Elbert, I appreciate it, and I'm a big fan of yours. You've been a leader in Kentucky for a long time. I remember when I was Ag Commissioner, you used to come by and see me on down the road
Yeah.
there at the Department of Agriculture. Certainly, KACo and the Magistrate Association is fortunate to have a good leader like you there that devotes your time to community service. And I'm excited because you're from a small town in the 1st Congressional District, and you understand the challenges that a lot of rural communities have are different than the challenges that Lexington, Louisville, and Covington have. So I'm excited to be here today to answer your questions. I look forward to working with you in the future, look forward to working with KACo in the future, and I think that we can work together and hopefully take advantage of a potential renaissance in rural America.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
being
Appreciate
here.
it. Thank you.
Now we gotta do that overrun.
Hey, we can do it.
We can do it.